Destiny's House of Wolves dropped on the 19th of May, and I thought I'd take a look at it and just talk about the game in general. Obviously, as always, it's subjective and from my point of view. I've no interest in upsetting anyone and have no vetted interest in seeing the game bloom or fail. I've had this game since it released and I do play it. It's been a game that I've gotten bored of and then picked up again and re-enjoyed on quite a few occasions. In my opinion, the game's really solid and it plays very well and it's been built to a really good standard. It's fun to play and it's even more fun when you play it with friends. My problem with the game, and this is why I get bored and sort of put it down and re-pick it back up, is due to the amount of content it's got in it. I literally loved this game throughout its vanilla period, up to level 20 and beyond to about level 26, and then I hit the grind. It got to the point where you had to repeat the same content over and over again until the item you needed to progress dropped in the random loot generation system. I've played MMOs quite extensively in the past and I'm not adverse to a bit of grinding to get that progression going, and I really don't have a problem with random loot drops either. For me, it's kind of a system that creates a bit of tension and a bit of suspense, and I don't think that in a game that's a bad thing. I think a lot of people hated that system as they expected an instant reward for their work, but I would say that if you got that instant reward, you'd have completed this game so quickly you'd have been left with nothing at all to do. The vanilla game's only end game content was strikes, which, if you don't know what they are, they're 3-player co-op missions, which are a case of clear the trash, kill the boss. Not an issue, they're fun, they're enjoyable, get a group of friends, good laugh, decent. Problem is, there was only 6 of them. 6. That number is way too small to keep people interested, and I think Bungie may have been surprised by the speed in which people had got to the point of repeating them over and over again. After about a month or so, they dropped in the first raid to the game, the Vault of Glass it was called, which, if you've not played, is a challenging 6-player strike with mechanics that had a requirement for you to do far more than just kill everything. You'd effectively have to solve puzzles while you were killing. The raid was excellent. I really enjoyed playing it, and I did play it through many times, hunting for the items I wanted. There was an issue with it though, that personally I think is a big mistake, and that's the fact it doesn't have a matchmaking system. So any solo players, or any groups of friends that are less than 6, couldn't really do it, and they all got stuck behind, sat on the same level, trying to spending hours to try and find a group of strangers to run it through with. The resourceful community, however, have turned a section of the recruitment forums into a raid finder, so if you're still struggling and you want to complete that content, you can go on to their forums. If you've got a PC, a laptop, or even a smartphone with the Destiny app, you can go on there and start hunting for groups, start groups and go through. I think it's a big design flaw. I think most MMO style games knew this some time ago, and they seem to have developed group finding systems and built them into their games. I still hope that they one day do this, however they seem determined not to for some reason. It'll make a big difference to the game. Granted, you may very well find a group of turnips that don't know which button is the shooty one, but hey, at least you'll be able to get in there and try it. The first DLC, The Dark Below, came in December 2014. It delivered new missions, new gear, 2 new strikes and another raid. This DLC isn't terrible, and I don't think it's particularly low on content, but when you combine it with the above, that's only made it a total of 8 strikes. With a fair chunk of the community already bored to death of the other 6, it wasn't going to stay fresh for very long. Personally, it held my interest for just under a month, I'd say about 3.5 weeks, and then I'd kind of switched off to it again. For me, I'm kind of sat on the fence with the DLC, but there's an opinion that I have, and I think there's a fundamental flaw with the design and the alteration of the progression system that came with these DLCs, in both DLCs, but I'll get to that later. Aside from the PvE content, the Crucible, which is the multiplayer PvP part of the game, is okay, but again, seems a bit low on map count, and it does get a bit samey for me. Although I guess the problem I have, and this is just a personal problem for me, is that I'm a Battlefield player, and I'm used to my first person online shooter experience being massively diverse, and Destiny just isn't. The House of Wolves, which is the second expansion and the one that released yesterday, brings another 2 strikes into the game and brings it up to a total of 10, which is starting to sound much better. Now, when you join a strike playlist, you're not repeating yourself within the same evening if you only play it for a few hours at a time. The House of Wolves also brings new weapons, new missions, a new multiplayer mode, and a co-op game mode called the Prison of Elders instead of a raid. I've not had time to get footage of the Prison of Elders, but it's basically a horde arena where you must survive waves of enemies in order to gain access to a treasure room full of the items required to get the best gear. This game mode has a level selector, so you can enter it from level 28 up to level 35, and what you will get will change based on the difficulty you've entered it at. It's going to work like a raid, and it's going to contain lockouts so that you can only do it once a week if you pick the higher tiers. I've only taken a small look into playing this so far, and I've not yet made up my mind, and I can't forge an opinion on this as to whether I think it's a masterstroke or laziness. It must have been far easier to set up than a raid would have been in terms of development times and sort of outlay financially, but it does change the format of the game, which is also never a bad thing. On to the fundamental flaw that I was talking about earlier. Both DLCs have completely changed the progression system within the game, which is related to the gear that you get. Of course, this is again entirely an opinion of mine, and you may or may not agree, but there's a token system, and these tokens, which are Vanguard and Crucible marks, can be used to buy gear. And ultimately the gear is what you level up with. When the DLCs came out, the gear you then get from these marks is the statistical equal of the gear you could get before the DLC dropped. For example, the first raid at the time had the best gear in the game, but when the second raid came out and that second DLC, you could just buy gear that was the equivalent of the first raid. So now you've got this situation where you can entirely skip the first raid, just buy the equivalent gear and enter into the second one, like not playing that first raid at all. So you could just skip content, and it makes you wonder that if they apply that to the entire game, what's it going to be like after 10 DLCs if they do keep updating this game the way they intend to, and they do it for several years like they've said they will. 10 DLCs time, you could effectively go from playing the base strikes to the end game content just with those tokens, which aren't particularly hard to get. I would say it'd probably take you about a month and a half due to the capping system. You could skip the whole game if you wanted to. If someone bought this game in 2 years' time, they could skip it, go all the way to the end and play the end game content. For me, that is such a bad idea. I mean, people may not agree. People who've bought the game late may think it's the best thing ever because they get instantly to top rank, but you've just missed so much. Surely you play these games for hours of entertainment and you don't just want to go from start to finish that quickly. In short though, I really do like this game, but I wish it had some more content in it, and for me it's got a couple of massive flaws. So I'm sat on the fence with it. At some point I may actually be able to pull this seemingly permanently lodged fence post out of my ass and decide if I like it or not. I guess that's the reason I've never done a video on this before. I just don't know. Any comments or opinions, please let me know below. I'm always interested to see what people think, both of me, my videos, and the games I'm playing. But that's all for now. Have a good day.